Once upon a time in the golden kingdom of Altheria, where the sun kissed the marble towers and the rivers glistened like liquid silver, there lived a royal family destined to shape the fate of an entire world. There was the king, Alaric the Just, a man whose name resonated with the strength of an oak tree and the gentleness of a flowing stream. His voice carried authority, yet his eyes held the weariness of years spent defending his people. Beside him was Queen Alara, whose near presence could soothe the fiercest of tempests. Radiant and gentle, her kindness touched even the poorest farmer in the realm. Together, they had built a kingdom admired by allies and feared by enemies. Yet the true story did not belong to them alone. It belonged to their daughter, Princess Serafina. Now, from the day Serafina was born, the whispers had echoed through the palace halls, "When shadows rise, the future shall rest in the hands of the flame-born child." Her hair shimmered like fire under the sun, and her spirit was untamed. She was a warrior in disguise, a dreamer among rulers, and the hope of the kingdom. But alas, fate, as always, was not kind. For across the seas, in the blackened empire of Draymorth, a rival king named Malek the Cruel prepared to wage war. His soldiers marched like storms, their banners painted with the ashes of conquered lands, their armor the cold steel of fallen stars. And his gaze was set on Altheria, the last free beacon of light in a world slowly succumbing to shadows. The council urged King Alaric to prepare for battle. The men wanted to fight, to stand against the darkness with sword and shield. But the queen, wise and unshaken, turned to Serafina, her eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "My child," she said softly, "you are the bridge between what we are and what we must become. The kingdom's tomorrow rests in your hands." Serafina trembled. She was barely 17 summers old, her heart still torn between the simplicity of childhood dreams and the heavy cloak of destiny. How could she, a girl who knew the warmth of her father's embrace and the soft touch of her mother's lullabies, be expected to lead a nation into the jaws of war? Yet when she stood upon the castle balcony and saw her people, men, women, and children looking up at her with hope, something ignited within her. A tiny ember, no bigger than a starling's eye, yet burning with an unquenchable flame. She would not let them fall. She would not let the kingdom wither and die. And so, with a heart full of trepidation and a spirit ablaze with resolve, Serafina took her first step towards becoming the beacon of hope that Altheria needed. It was a long and arduous journey. There were moments when doubt threatened to consume her, when the weight of the prophecy pressed down on her like a physical burden. Yet with each passing day she grew. She led an army not of hardened soldiers, but of believers. Farmers who laid down their tools to pick up shields, blacksmiths who beat swords into plows, healers who mended wounds and whispered prayers. Ordinary folk, simple folk who chose to rise when darkness threatened to swallow their world. Her courage became their weapon, a shining mirror reflecting their own bravery. Her vision became their light, a north star guiding them through the long and lonely nights. And when the inevitable winter came, when the black storm of Draymorth finally struck, Altheria stood ready. The king Alaric fought with the strength of 10 men, his every strike echoing with years of pent-up rage. The queen Alara stood unyielding by his side, her magic a shimmering bulwark against the encroaching gloom. But it was Serafina who stood apart, facing the enemy head-on. She dueled with the rival king, Malek the Cruel, whose very name was a dirge of despair. Steel clashed like thunder, shaking the foundations of the kingdom. And with each passing moment, the shadow of defeat loomed larger, threatening to engulf Altheria in its icy grip. Then in that darkest hour, when hope flickered like a candle flame in the wind, Serafina remembered her mother's words. She remembered the faces of her people, their hopes, their dreams, their fears. And she realized that the future wasn't written in some ancient prophecy or etched in the cold, hard steel of a blade. The future was something she created with every breath, with every defiant step, with every act of courage. It was something she carried within her, a small, fragile thing, yet as eternal as the stars. Raising her voice above the din of battle, Serafina cried out, "The future is not written by fear. It is carved by love, by sacrifice, and by those who dare to dream beyond themselves." Her cry, echoing with the strength of 1,000 suns, reverberated across the field. The words struck a chord within the soldiers of Draymorth, awakening a long-forgotten echo of defiance, a spark of hope that refused to be extinguished. The momentum shifted. The tide turned. And in that instant, the prophecy was fulfilled not by magic, not by bloodlines, but by the courage of a young girl who chose to become more than what destiny demanded. As the last enemy fell, and the echoes of battle faded into the twilight, Serafina looked out over the land she called home. The scars of war were fresh, the wounds deep, but the sun was rising again, painting the sky with hues of hope and healing. In the days that followed, as the kingdom began to mend its wounds and rebuild its dreams, Serafina knew that her journey was far from over. She understood that being the heartbeat of a kingdom meant not just leading in times of triumph, but also in the quiet moments of rebuilding and healing. With the support of her parents, the love of her people, and the lessons etched in her heart, she began the arduous task of nation building. She introduced reforms, initiated trade, and reached out to neighboring kingdoms, fostering alliances that would protect Altheria from future threats. Yet she never forgot the cost of peace. She established schools where children were taught not just about history, but about courage, compassion, and the importance of unity. She built hospitals where healers were revered as heroes, and she reformed the army, turning it into a force that protected the innocent rather than waged pointless wars. Years turned into decades, and Serafina, the once timid princess, became known throughout the land as Serafina the Wise, the monarch who steered Altheria from the brink of destruction to prosperity and peace. However, as the kingdom flourished, Serafina never forgot the prophecy that had shadowed her since birth. Whenever she looked up at the stars, she saw not just celestial bodies, but a reminder of the responsibility she carried. For kingdoms rise and fall, empires crumble to dust, yet the stars keep twinkling in the vast expanse of the cosmos. Similarly, as time went on, new challenges arose, new threats gathered on the horizon. But Serafina faced each one with the same courage and wisdom that had become her hallmark. She dealt with rebellions, navigated treacherous political alliances, and even survived assassination attempts with grace and dignity. Through it all, she remained steadfast, her spirit unbroken, her resolve unyielding. Yet as she aged, the weight of her responsibilities began to tell on her. The lines on her face deepened, etching stories of battles fought and won, of tears shed and of sacrifices made. The sparkle in her eyes, though dimmed with age, still held the fire of her youth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the kingdom, Serafina sat in her throne room, her gaze lost in the flickering flames of the hearth. Her daughter, the young Princess Elara, stood beside her, her eyes filled with concern. "Mother, why do you look so troubled?" she asked softly, her voice echoing in the vast emptiness of the room. Serafina turned to her daughter, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "I was just thinking how time has flown," she said, her voice raspy with age. "It seems like just yesterday that I was a young girl playing in the castle gardens, and now here I am, nearing the end of my journey." Elara stepped closer, her hand resting on her mother's arm. "Your journey?" she questioned, her brow furrowed in confusion. Serafina's smile faded, replaced by a look of solemn determination. "The prophecy, my dear child, the prophecy is a burden I have carried for many years. But now I realize it was not just a burden, it was a privilege to serve our kingdom, our people, to protect everything we hold dear." She rose from her throne, her joints aching with the effort, and walked to the window, her gaze sweeping across the kingdom bathed in the soft glow of twilight. "The future of Altheria will rest in your hands, Alara," she said, turning back to her daughter, her eyes shining with tears. "You are the flame-born child, and it is your duty, your sacred duty, to carry on the legacy of our kingdom." Alara, though too young to fully comprehend the weight of these words, felt a shiver run down her spine. The prophecy, she realized, was not just a whisper in the wind, it was a bond, a connection to her ancestors, to her kingdom, and to the countless lives that hung in the balance. In that moment, as mother and daughter stood bathed in the fading light, they both knew that a new chapter was beginning, a chapter that would test Alara's courage, her wisdom, and her unwavering love for her people. For kingdoms rise and fall, empires crumble to dust, yet hope, once lit, burns eternally.